So for a while now, I've been interested and fascinated by the question of whether it's possible to truly improvise and explore different sound worlds and creative ideas at the keyboard, but using the entire orchestral palette at once, and sort of being able to move simply between brass and woodwinds and tutti kind of textures. You might have seen some amazing tech demos on the web by a guy called Peter Gromer, where he's playing the keyboard and using a breath controller and using Divisimate to control a whole bunch of VSTs, and it gives that illusion that he's essentially playing what sounds like a finished piece of orchestral music, and just executing it all in real time. Just before I go on, I want to say that I'm in no way trying to suggest that orchestral composition is about just jamming stuff out of the keyboard and kind of quickly layering together some stuff based on some preset templates. Obviously, the art of orchestration and the art of the music that I love to listen to personally goes a lot deeper than that and is a real craft that takes, decades to master fully. I wanted to just focus the scope of this video on talking about Divisimate as a live improv tool, possibly useful for sketching, although even there I'm not sure. Really, it's just driven by the fact that it's very entertaining and fun to use Divisimate for improvising, because it gives me access to a whole range of colours that I wouldn't have if I was just improvising at the piano. So the way I'll structure this video is, first I'll give a quick overview of Divisimate, how it works, how I've got my VST set up, just a very brief overview, and then I'll talk about some of my custom patches that I've created specifically with the purpose in mind of live improvisation in an orchestral idiom. And then in the last part of the video, which you can feel free to skip to if you're not interested in any of the setup, I'll just do 3 improvisations inspired by creative prompts that other people have submitted, and they'll be completely unedited, no overdubs, just kind of what you see is what you get. They're a bit rough around the edges, but I think they give a good idea of where things are headed. This is just very much a kind of journal of where I'm at in terms of chasing this dream of playing the orchestra with just 2 hands and a breath controller. So now I'll just give a very quick overview of how Divisimate works in case you've not come across it before. So I've got my orchestral template here, and you'll notice that there's just 1 track per instrument, except for the strings where I've got a track stack, and there's just 2 instruments there. One key feature of the VSTs that I've chosen to use for this setup is that they're all very versatile and playable and agile patches. I'm using the infinite woodwinds, I'm using infinite brass. Then with the strings I have 2 layers. This first layer is actually a custom contact patch that consists of 2 layers within this single instrument. That's the Symphobia, sustains, and then the staccatos, and I've set them up in a way that it's polyphonic, and also you can play long and short and it sounds pretty good. And then I've layered that with the SWAM viola or SWAM solo instruments, just to give it a bit more detail on the legatos. I'll just give you a quick blast of that now. So as you can hear there, just playing it, I can do multiple notes, I can do short notes, long notes, and overall the sound is pretty solid. Most of the time realism in mock-ups is about choosing the right tool for the job, whereas this, I'm really going for versatility in every case. So that's kind of part 1 of the setup, choosing the instruments. Then you'll notice over here in the track section, I've got the MIDI in port set to a Divisimate port, and there are 32 Divisimate ports that you can assign, and each port corresponds to a different instrument. And in the background I've got Divisimate running here, and this is what it looks like. You can see there's a kind of mapping area here. Essentially it allows you to split the keyboard into different zones. So we've got a low zone here, then the upper zone has 3 voices. It's searching for 3 voices, so when I play a 3-voice chord in this patch, it's going to split out the MIDI. So for example, voice 1 is going to go to, follow it all the way up, oboe and flute, as well as violin 1. And then over here we've got presets. This page I've got set to some presets that I made specifically for the purposes of live improvisation. So basically all you have to do is hit record, and then whatever instruments are playing will be sent to the appropriate MIDI tracks. And there we are. and it's pretty much done a perfect job of splitting them out. And then the final piece of the live improvisation setup is the iPad app, which I've got here, which essentially just replicates this page, but on a touchscreen, so that I can have it next to my keyboard when I'm playing, and just with my finger select the different patches, just as if I was clicking like this. And so each patch has a different kind of mapping setup. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is that not only can you send the individual voices of chords to different MIDI channels, so it's got a voice detection system represented by these numbers, but you can also transpose the individual ports or channels as well. So that in itself is a very powerful tool, because it allows you to play close position chords and play very comfortably on the piano, but the resulting voicing can be very large and grand. So for example, I've got a patch here called Big Old Strings. I've specifically set it up so that when I play a close position chord like this, so you can see in blue the actual notes that I'm playing on the keyboard, but if you listen, it's actually, the sound of the chord is different because we've got a transposer on the middle voice, which is dropping it down an octave from the middle note that I'm playing. So although I'm playing C, E, G, what you're actually hearing is C, G, and then the E an octave below that, so it creates this nice spacious voicing. And then here in the left hand, I've got the cellos and the double basses playing in octaves. By the way, the yellow section up here is melody, and that's a third zone that you can implement that's just monophonic. It just gives me a little bit of extra choice without changing patches. So this just functions in the same way as the low, it's just an extra zone that you can send. Basically, as I alluded to earlier, my main philosophy with these has been to try and keep the patches quite simple, sacrifice the complexity and the kind of bells and whistles for something that's a bit more playable and just gives me access to a few different colours without imposing a really strong character a lot of the time. So like some of these lower patches down here are a little bit more specific. So for example, I have pizzicato and bassoon, which sounds like this. You know, and that's kind of a bit more characterful. And similarly, I've got piano and strings here. But even there, with the piano and strings, say, you know, you can do different kinds of things. You don't necessarily have to do sentimental, romantic piano. You know, you can do kind of something a bit more eerie. But essentially the way I've organised it is I've got kind of tutti, mostly tutti or kind of wind and strings type patches at the top, a couple of variations. So like this one is woodwinds and strings, kind of quite simple. By the way, I'm using my breath controller to control the expression, and then I can use the bite to add a bit of vibrato. I also have access to the vibrato speed via the mod wheel. And then if I want to open it up and make it a bit larger sounding, I've got this patch which has some brass in it. Again, it's just kind of layering approach. So really there you can see I'm just playing a D minor triad. So again, these blue notes are showing what I'm actually playing. But the sound that you're hearing is much larger because it's a much more spacious voicing. So you can do stuff like that, but then again, you're not limited to that sort of tempo. You know, I can do... So the top row is fairly generic orchestral sound, generally sort of tutti or strings and wind. And then I've got, on the second row, things that are a bit more specifically about one family of instruments, so that kind of feature the winds or feature the brass a bit more. So one of my favourites is this epic brass and strings, where I've got this really rich voicing in the brass with layered trombones and trumpets. And there's a great dynamic range on this as well, so... Sorry, there's a little bit of a crackle there because my CPU's struggling with the screen record software as well. If I don't want a kind of such an epic brass sound, then I've got this other one that's a little bit lighter, that's more focused on the trumpets. And then up at the top, I've got some string sustains that I... So this is really starting to get close to my dream of just being able to create these conversations between different orchestral colours sort of in real time, based on just something that's in my head or some prompt that I'm using as a creative jumping off point. And then when I was doing some kind of practice runs, I found I wanted to just have access to something that was just brass or just woods. So I created these patches, which basically contain some bassoons down here in octaves, and then I've got some legato clarinets and things in the middle, and then at the top got a solo flute. Part of the challenge is knowing where these split points are for the different patches, so that's something I'm still, I guess, just practicing and seeing if there's a system where I can be a bit more consistent with where the split points land. But yeah, there's a lot of powerful creative possibilities there, and something nice about having access to just the woods as a single colour that I can then play with or just bring in at a particular moment in the piece. So similarly with the brass, I wanted to have something that was just brass when I want brass, you know? some solo trumpet there. So just kind of, I guess by limiting myself to this many patches, it's not a huge limitation. There's still quite a few patches and I'm still learning them, but I think by sort of just learning where all of these different colours are and just getting swifter at reaching for the right ones at the right moments, I think there's a lot of potential I can sense there for interesting stuff. I said I wasn't going to play every patch. I've played quite a few. I just want to share this one, Spacious String Pair. So this is quite a simple mapping. I've got two voices being tracked here in the upper part of the keyboard with the strings, and this one has a transposer on it that brings it down an octave. In addition, there's a subtle harp being layered with the cello there in the left hand. So again, if you just watch the blue notes as I'm playing, so you can see what I'm actually playing, but then listen to hear how much wider the sound is. So with these multi-part voice tracking sections, you can also just play monophonic lines. It's a little bit clunkier than if you were to use the one of these green or yellow bars, but it does offer you that flexibility. So that's another beautiful thing about this from a live improvisational perspective, is that I also have access to that unison sound, or in this case octaves, so I can switch between. So that concludes this part of the video. What you'll hear next is some live improvisation. I've left it completely unedited so that you can get a sense of just where I'm at and what's possible with this kind of setup. So I'm going to be picking some song ideas out of a bowl. These are song titles that other people have suggested to me, and then just improvising something on the spot. Usually you're hearing, I think, the first take or the second take. So it's very much what you see is what you get. They're not perfect, but I think they're a good representation of the aspect that I find most exciting, which is this ability to kind of grab for different colours while sort of telling a bit of a story musically. So without further ado, here's 3 improvised pieces based on creative prompts. And thanks very much for watching.